My name is Mason Mitchell, I'm 32 years old, and I never thought my own parents would abandon me in a hospital bed to vacation in Italy. After my near-fatal car crash, they left me broken and alone, sending a voicemail that still haunts me. We're off to Rome, don't bother calling us. Their betrayal changed everything. So I made a decision that would shock them as much as they shocked me. Before I tell you what I did, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button to join me on this journey of betrayal and justice. I grew up in a modest neighborhood on the outskirts of Chicago, where my parents, Richard and Diane Mitchell, raised me and my younger brother Lucas. From the earliest days I can remember, there was always an unspoken favoritism in our household. Lucas was the golden child, his artwork always prominently displayed on the refrigerator, his achievements celebrated with elaborate dinners, his needs prioritized over mine. I was the afterthought, the kid who learned to fend for himself because no one else would. When Lucas wanted new baseball equipment, my parents found the money somehow. When I needed a graphing calculator for advanced math, I mowed lawns all summer to save up. This pattern continued throughout our childhood. But I never let it defeat me. Instead, it fueled my determination to succeed on my own terms. By 16, I was taking advanced placement classes and working part-time at a local computer repair shop. My parents rarely attended my academic competitions or asked about my grades, but I kept pushing forward. I graduated as valedictorian of my high school class. My parents sat in the audience looking bored while I gave my speech, then rushed to congratulate Lucas on completing his freshman year with passing grades. I put myself through college with scholarships and part-time jobs, double majoring in computer science and business. Those years were tough, ramen noodles and sleepless nights, but they hardened my resolve. By 25, I had founded my own tech security firm. By 30, my company had expanded to 3 major cities, and I was finally seeing the financial rewards of my relentless work ethic. That's when the family dynamic shifted in an unexpected way. My parents, now in their early 60s, began having financial difficulties. My father had mismanaged his retirement funds, and my mother had never worked enough to build substantial savings of her own. They started with small requests, help with a surprising medical bill, a loan when their car broke down, that gradually evolved into regular financial support. "Mason, you know we wouldn't ask if we weren't desperate," became a monthly refrain, usually delivered over the phone since they rarely made the effort to visit me in person. I could have refused, pointed to all the years they neglected me in favor of Lucas. But something in me, some need for validation I hadn't yet outgrown, made me say yes each time. Soon, I was covering their mortgage payments, utility bills, and providing a monthly allowance that exceeded what many people earn in a paycheck. I told myself it was the right thing to do, that I was being the bigger person. But with each check I wrote, the resentment grew deeper. Lucas, meanwhile, had bounced between community colleges, never completing a degree but always full of excuses about why he needed just a little more time and money. After my parents' requests became more frequent, Lucas started calling me directly. He needed tuition for another attempt at college, rent money for an apartment he shared with friends, funds to start a business venture that inevitably failed within months. "You've got so much, bro," he would say, as if my success had fallen from the sky instead of being earned through years of sacrifice and hard work. Sharing a little with family shouldn't be a big deal. And so I became the family bank, the reliable source of funds for people who had never been reliable for me. My parents began planning elaborate vacations, buying new furniture, and indulging in restaurants they couldn't afford. Lucas leased a luxury car and posted Instagram photos from expensive clubs, all while I worked 70-hour weeks building my company. 3 months before the accident, I had a particularly difficult conversation with my parents about boundaries. They had withdrawn an extra $5,000 from the account I had set up for their expenses, claiming they needed it for emergency roof repairs. When I drove by their house the following weekend, I saw no evidence of any work being done, but noticed my father was wearing an expensive new golf watch. "We didn't think you'd mind," my mother said dismissively when I questioned them. "You make so much money now." "That's not the point," I tried to explain. "It's about respect and communication. You're becoming so stingy," my father accused. "Is money more important than your family?" That question hung in the air between us, loaded with decades of emotional manipulation. I left their house that day with a knot in my stomach, wondering if I was the unreasonable one. Maybe this was just what family did for each other. Maybe my expectations of mutual respect were too high. Little did I know, this tension was just the warm-up act for what was coming next. The night that changed everything was unusually stormy for October in Chicago. I was driving home from a crucial meeting with potential investors, my mind racing with possibilities for expanding my company nationwide. The rain came down in sheets, reducing visibility to mere feet in front of my car. I remember gripping the steering wheel tightly, leaning forward as if those few inches would help me see through the downpour. I was driving cautiously, under the speed limit, when it happened. Headlights appeared in my lane, coming straight toward me, bright, blinding, wrong. The drunk driver had crossed the center line on the curved road, giving me only seconds to react. I jerked the wheel hard to avoid a head-on collision, but on the rain-slicked pavement, my car hydroplaned. The world became a blur of spinning lights and screeching metal as my vehicle careened off the road and down an embankment, rolling twice before slamming into a tree. The impact was catastrophic. The airbags deployed with explosive force, but couldn't fully protect me from the crushing metal and shattering glass. I felt bones snap in my left leg and right arm. Something punctured my side, later identified as a piece of the car's frame that had broken through the door panel. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, but the terror of being trapped was worse. I don't remember much after that initial impact. Fragments of memory remain, the taste of blood in my mouth, the sound of rain pattering on the crumpled roof, the distant wail of sirens growing closer. Then darkness. I woke up 3 days later in the intensive care unit of Northwestern Memorial Hospital. The fluorescent lights were harsh against my eyes as I struggled to understand where I was and what had happened. A nurse noticed I was conscious and quickly called for the doctor. "Mr. Mitchell," the doctor said, her face serious but kind. "You've been in a serious accident. You have multiple fractures in your left femur and tibia, a broken right humerus, 4 broken ribs, a punctured lung, and a moderate concussion. We had to perform surgery to repair internal bleeding in your abdomen, and you'll need additional surgeries for your leg." The news hit me like another collision. I tried to move and was rewarded with excruciating pain that the morphine couldn't fully mask. The doctor continued explaining that my recovery would be lengthy, at least 6 months before I could walk normally again, and potentially a year before I'd be fully recovered. "You're lucky to be alive," she concluded. "The paramedics said the condition of your car suggested the impact should have been fatal." Lucky wasn't how I felt as the medication pulled me back under into uneasy sleep. When I next awoke, the pain was sharper, more defined. Each breath caused stabbing pain in my side. My leg felt like it was being crushed continuously. The nurse adjusted my pain medication, but explained they were being cautious with the dosage due to the head injury. "Has my family been notified?" I asked, my voice raspy from the breathing tube that had been removed. "Yes, your parents visited briefly yesterday while you were still unconscious," she replied. "They left their contact information." I tried calling them from the hospital phone, my fingers clumsy with the unfamiliar buttons. When I finally got through, my mother answered with irritation in her voice. "Mason, we're in the middle of dinner. Can this wait?" I explained that I was awake and wanted to see them. She sighed audibly before agreeing they would come by the following day. When they arrived, almost 24 hours later, their visit lasted less than 30 minutes. My father complained about the hospital parking fees, my mother wrinkled her nose at the smell of antiseptic, and neither seemed to grasp the severity of my condition. "Well, at least you're insured," my father said, patting my uninjured arm awkwardly. "These hospital bills would bankrupt you otherwise." Lucas trailed behind them, barely looking up from his phone. When our eyes did meet, he gave a half-hearted wave from across the room, never coming close enough to see the extent of my injuries. As they were preparing to leave, much earlier than the end of visiting hours, I overheard my mother in the hallway. "This is so inconvenient with the Italy trip coming up next week," she said to my father, not quite quietly enough. "Do you think we should postpone? We've been planning this for months," my father replied. "Mason will be fine. The doctors are taking care of him." Their voices faded as they walked away, leaving me staring at the ceiling, too shocked to even process what I'd heard. The trip they were referring to was a 2-week vacation to Italy that I had unknowingly financed. They had mentioned it months ago as a dream trip they were saving for, never disclosing that the money they were saving was coming directly from my monthly deposits to their account. The following days were a blur of pain, medical tests, and surgeries. My business partner Tyler was the only consistent visitor, bringing my laptop so I could try to work when the pain medication wasn't making me too drowsy. He managed our company while I was incapacitated, giving me daily updates and handling the meetings I couldn't attend. "Your parents haven't been back?" he asked on the 5th day, noticing the empty visitor log beside my bed. "They're busy," I said, the excuse sounding hollow even to my own ears. I hadn't told him about overhearing their conversation about Italy. Some part of me still wanted to believe they wouldn't actually go through with the trip while I was hospitalized. The nurses showed more concern for my well-being than my own family. One in particular, a woman named Sarah who worked the night shift, would check on me during her breaks, sometimes just sitting quietly beside my bed when the pain kept me awake. "Family can be complicated," she said one night when I finally opened up about my parents' absence. "Sometimes the people who should care the most just don't know how." Her kindness made the upcoming betrayal all the more stark by comparison. On the 7th day after the accident, I was preparing for another surgery to insert pins in my shattered leg when my parents finally returned. They were dressed nicely, too nicely for a hospital visit, and had the distinct air of people with somewhere better to be. "We need to talk to you about something," my mother began, standing at the foot of my bed rather than coming closer. "We know the timing isn't ideal, but we've decided to go ahead with our Italy trip." The words hung in the air between us. Despite overhearing their conversation days earlier, hearing them actually confirm it sent a wave of disbelief through me. "You're still going?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm having surgery in 2 hours. And you'll be having surgeries and treatments for months," my father countered, as if that justified their decision. "We can't put our lives on hold indefinitely. We've been planning this trip for almost a year. The tickets are non-refundable," my mother added, as if the financial consideration outweighed my medical crisis. "And the travel insurance doesn't cover this kind of situation." I looked from one to the other, searching for any sign of guilt or hesitation. There was none. In their minds, the decision was perfectly reasonable. "What about Lucas?" I asked. "Is he staying to help me?" My mother brightened at the mention of my brother. "Actually, we're taking Lucas with us. He's never been to Europe, and it's such an educational opportunity for him. His art history professor is giving him course credit for visiting all the museums we have planned." The casual cruelty of the statement left me momentarily speechless. My brother, unemployed, perpetually studying, living off my financial support, was being taken on an Italian vacation while I lay broken in a hospital bed. And they expected me to accept this as normal. "I might need help when I'm discharged," I said, trying to appeal to their practical side. "The doctors say I won't be able to manage stairs or drive for weeks. You can afford to hire help," my father dismissed. "Or have one of your work friends assist you. Tyler seems very capable." We'll only be gone for 2 weeks, my mother added, checking her watch subtly. You'll still be in the hospital for most of that time anyway. A nurse entered to prepare me for surgery, giving me a sympathetic look when she noticed the tension in the room. We should get going, my father said, clearly relieved by the interruption. Traffic to the airport will be getting heavy soon. You're leaving right now? I couldn't hide the shock in my voice. I'm going into surgery. The surgery will take hours, and you'll be groggy afterward, my mother reasoned. There's really no point in us waiting around. We'll check in when we can. With perfunctory pats on my uninjured arm, they said their goodbyes. My mother promised to send pictures and bring me back a souvenir. My father reminded me that the automatic payment to their account was scheduled for the following week and asked if I could add a little extra for their spending money. Neither of them seemed to register the hurt and disbelief on my face. 3 hours later, as I was being wheeled back from surgery, still groggy from anesthesia, my phone pinged with a voicemail notification. Using my one functional hand, I played the message on speaker. Mason, it's Mom and Dad. We're at the airport waiting to board. We just wanted to let you know we're off to Rome. Don't bother calling us for the next 2 weeks. International rates are expensive, and we want to enjoy our trip without interruptions. Lucas is so excited about the cooking classes we've signed up for. The doctors say you'll live, so try not to be so dramatic about everything. We'll see you when we get back. Ciao. The cheerful, dismissive tone cut deeper than the surgical incisions healing under my bandages. The nurse who was checking my vital signs froze, clearly having overheard the message. Her eyes met mine, filled with stunned compassion. Did they really just? She began, then stopped herself. I'm so sorry. The tears came then, hot and humiliating. I turned my face away. But there was no hiding the shaking of my shoulders as the full weight of their abandonment crashed down on me. The physical pain of my injuries seemed almost welcome in comparison to the emotional wound that had just been inflicted. For the next 3 days, I cycled through grief, anger, and disbelief. The hospital psychologist was called in when I refused to eat. She sat with me, listening as I poured out the history of my relationship with my parents, their favoritism toward Lucas, and this final, unforgivable betrayal. What you're feeling is a normal response to abnormal behavior, she assured me. Their actions aren't a reflection of your worth. On the 4th day after their departure, I received a text message from my mother. It contained no words of concern about my condition, no questions about my recovery. Instead, it was a photo of my parents and Lucas eating gelato in front of the Trevi fountain, all three smiling broadly at the camera. The caption read, "Living our best life. The hotel upgraded us to a suite." That image, their carefree enjoyment while I struggled through excruciating physical therapy sessions and fought off post-surgical infections, crystallized something in me. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment, or an isolated incident of selfishness. This was who they truly were, and who they had always been. I had just been too desperate for their approval to see it clearly. As I stared at that photo, something shifted inside me. The hurt began to harden into resolve. If they could so easily dismiss me in my time of greatest need, then perhaps it was time I stopped being their financial safety net. The idea took root and began to grow, nourished by every remembered slight and betrayal from throughout my life. During the long, pain-filled nights in the hospital, when sleep evaded me and the walls seemed to close in, my mind kept returning to that voicemail. "Don't bother calling us." Those 5 words replayed on an endless loop, each repetition stoking a smoldering anger that was gradually replacing my initial hurt. On the 10th day of my hospitalization, I asked Tyler to bring me additional items from my home office. My financial folders, my laptop with secure access to all my accounts, and my phone with the contact information for my financial advisor and lawyer. The hospital staff had moved me from ICU to a standard room, which afforded me more privacy to conduct business. "Are you sure you should be working right now?" Tyler asked. concerned as he watched me struggling to sit upright in bed. The doctor said stress could slow your recovery. This isn't work, I replied. This is necessary personal business. Once I had everything I needed, I began a methodical inventory of every financial connection between myself and my family. The list was longer than even I had realized. Monthly direct deposits of $5,000 into my parents' joint checking account. Mortgage payments of $2,800 on their suburban home, which was titled in my name as a tax strategy they had insisted upon. Annual property tax payments of approximately $8,000. Car payments of $650 monthly for my father's SUV. Insurance premiums for their health supplemental plans, auto policies, and home coverage. Credit card payments on 3 separate cards they used for emergencies. Recent kitchen renovation costing $45,000. Lucas's tuition payments at his 3rd attempt at college. Lucas's apartment rent of $200 monthly for a luxury unit he shared with friends. Lucas's car lease of $550 monthly. Various medical bills, utility payments, and loans that were never repaid. All told, I was spending over $180,000 annually supporting my family, people who couldn't be bothered to sit by my hospital bed after a near-fatal accident. Next, I researched their Italy trip, accessing the credit card statements for the accounts I paid. The truth was even more galling than I had imagined. First-class flights for 3, $12. $600. 2-week stay at a luxury hotel near the Spanish Steps, $22,000. Private guided tours of the Vatican, Colosseum, and other attractions, $4. $800. Reservations at Michelin-starred restaurants throughout their stay, $3,500. Shopping allowance evident from the recent withdrawal, $10,000. Cooking classes with a renowned Italian chef, $2. $400. Wine tasting tour of Tuscany, a side trip planned during their stay, $3,200. They had spent nearly $60,000 on this vacation, more than many families earn in a year, using funds that I provided, while leaving me alone during a medical crisis. The realization solidified my resolve. I called my financial advisor, David Kellerman, from my hospital bed. "Mason, good to hear from you. How are you recovering?" he asked. "Not well," I admitted. "Which is part of why I'm calling. I need to make some significant changes to my financial arrangements." I explained the situation, not bothering to hide the emotion in my voice. David had been handling my investments for years and knew my family's situation peripherally, though I had never shared the full extent of their dependence on me. "I'm sorry you're going through this," he said when I finished. "From a financial perspective, what you're describing is within your rights. The accounts are in your name, and the house title is as well. Legally, you have the authority to make any changes you see fit. Next, I called my attorney, Rebecca Torres. I need to know if there are any legal implications to cutting off financial support to my parents and brother," I explained after updating her on the situation. "Assuming there are no written contracts regarding this support, and they're all adults, you have no legal obligation to continue supporting them," she confirmed. "The house might be more complicated since they've been living there with your permission, but as the title holder, you ultimately have control over that property. I'd suggest a formal written notice regarding any changes to that arrangement, armed with professional confirmation that what I was planning was both legally permissible and financially sound." I spent the next 2 days creating a detailed plan. I wanted the timing to be precise, not out of petty vindictiveness, but to ensure the message was unmistakable. They had abandoned me in my moment of crisis. Now they would understand what true abandonment felt like. During this planning period, I received 2 more photo messages from Italy. One showed Lucas posing with a street performer in a piazza. The other was my parents at a wine tasting, glasses raised in a toast. Neither message asked how I was doing or mentioned my condition in any way. I discussed my plan with the hospital psychologist during our next session, seeking an objective perspective on whether my actions were justified or merely vengeful. "It sounds like you're establishing boundaries that should have been in place long ago," she observed. "Financial support is often confused with love, both by the giver and the receiver. Clarifying that distinction isn't vindictive, it's healthy." Tyler was the last person I consulted. As both my business partner and closest friend, he had witnessed years of my family's entitled behavior and my enabling responses. "They left you here alone after you nearly died," he said simply. "Whatever you decide to do, I've got your back." With the emotional and practical groundwork laid, I was ready to implement my plan. The timing would be critical. I wanted them to experience the financial cutoff while still in Italy, far from home and dependent on the resources I provided. Not because I wanted them stranded, but because I wanted the lesson to be unmistakable. I set calendar reminders for each step of the process, aligning the financial moves with their itinerary. According to the travel documents I had access to, they would be in Rome for 5 more days, then Florence for 4, then Venice for 3 before flying home. They were currently in the most expensive part of their trip, with reservations at high-end restaurants and shops. As I finalized my preparations, I felt an unexpected sense of calm. This wasn't about revenge, I realized. It was about reclaiming my self-respect and establishing the boundaries I should have set years ago. Whether they learned anything from the experience was up to them, but I would no longer be complicit in my own mistreatment. The night before I was to begin, I had one moment of hesitation. Was I becoming as callous as they were? After careful reflection, I concluded that there was a fundamental difference. They had abandoned me in a life-threatening situation for pleasure. I was withdrawing voluntary financial support from capable adults who had taken advantage of my generosity for years. The two actions weren't morally equivalent. With that clarity, I prepared to execute my plan the following morning. I began implementing my plan on what would have been day 12 of my hospitalization. But a post-surgical infection had extended my stay indefinitely. The timing was almost poetic, as I fought another medical complication alone. My family would begin experiencing the consequences of their choices. The first step was the most straightforward. I called my bank and requested an immediate freeze on the joint checking account that I funded for my parents. This account had a current balance of approximately $18,000, more than enough for emergency needs, but not enough to continue their luxury vacation unchecked. "May I ask why you're freezing the account, Mr. Mitchell?" the bank representative inquired. "Security concerns," I replied, which wasn't entirely untrue. "I've noticed unusual spending patterns." Next, I contacted the credit card companies for each of the 3 cards I paid for monthly. Since I wasn't the cardholder, I couldn't cancel the cards directly, but I could certainly stop the automatic payments from my account and remove myself as an authorized payer. "Please note in the account that I will no longer be responsible for any charges incurred from today forward," I instructed each customer service representative. "Any existing balance is the responsibility of the primary cardholder." The third step was perhaps the most significant. I contacted the airline they had booked for their return flight. "I need to cancel the return portion of a reservation," I explained to the airline representative. "The confirmation number is JX42987. I see this is a first-class booking for 3 passengers returning from Venice to Chicago." The representative confirmed. "May I ask why you're canceling?" "Change of plans," I said simply. "They'll be extending their stay." I knew this wasn't actually true, but the alternative arrangements would be up to them to figure out. "There will be a cancellation fee of $750 per ticket," the representative warned. "That's fine," I replied, providing my credit card information for the fees. I didn't want to leave any financial loose ends that could be disputed later. With the immediate financial constraints in place, I moved on to the longer-term adjustments. I called my mortgage lender and informed them that I would be selling the property currently occupied by my parents. This wasn't something that would affect them immediately, but it set the process in motion. I'll need to provide formal notice to the current occupants, I explained to the lender. Please send all future correspondence regarding the mortgage to my personal address rather than the property address. I then contacted my lawyer to draft formal termination notices for all financial support. These documents would clearly state that effective immediately, I would no longer be providing financial assistance of any kind to Richard, Diane, or Lucas Mitchell. The notices included itemized lists of all previous support to establish the pattern of voluntary giving rather than obligation. The final step involved transferring the deed of my parents' house to a trust that I controlled. This wouldn't change their immediate living situation, but it would protect the asset from any potential legal challenges they might attempt. My lawyer assured me this was a prudent move given the circumstances. The documentation will be ready for your signature tomorrow, she confirmed. I can bring it to the hospital if you're still unable to travel. By midday, all the immediate financial changes had been implemented. I had also instructed my accountant to document all financial gifts to my family over the past 5 years for tax purposes, ensuring everything was properly recorded should questions arise later. As I completed the last call, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. There was satisfaction in taking concrete action after years of being taken advantage of, but also a lingering sadness that it had come to this. Despite everything, these were still the people who had raised me, however imperfectly. The nurse who came to check my vital signs noticed my pensive expression. "Tough day?" she asked kindly. "Necessary day," I replied. The first response came faster than I had anticipated. Just 3 hours after freezing the accounts, my phone lit up with a call from an Italian number. I let it go to voicemail, my heart pounding despite my resolve. "Mason, it's your father," came the angry voice in the recording. "There's some problem with the credit cards and the bank account. We're at dinner at La Pergola and they won't accept our payment. This is embarrassing and unacceptable. Call me back immediately." I didn't. 20 minutes later, my mother called. Her voicemail was more panicked than angry. "Mason, please call us back as soon as you get this. We're stranded at a restaurant and can't pay the bill. They're threatening to call the police. If this is some kind of bank error, you need to fix it right away." I didn't respond to that message either. The calls continued through the evening, 7 from my father, 5 from my mother, and 3 from Lucas. I silenced my phone, focusing instead on my physical therapy exercises despite the pain they caused. There was something fitting about pushing through physical discomfort, while they dealt with the discomfort of their circumstances. By the following morning, the tone of the messages had shifted from angry to desperate. "Mason, we don't know what's happening." My mother's voice trembled in her latest voicemail. "All our cards are being declined, and the hotel says our stay hasn't been fully paid. We had to borrow money from another American couple to settle the restaurant bill last night. Please call us back. This is serious." Lucas's message was more accusatory. "What the hell, Mason? Is this your idea of a joke? Mom and Dad are freaking out. And now the hotel is saying we need to provide another form of payment, or leave. Don't be such a dick." Still, I maintained my silence. My physical condition was improving gradually. I was now able to stand with assistance and take a few steps with a walker. The doctors were pleased with my progress, though they cautioned that I still had months of recovery ahead. I worked with determination during each therapy session, focusing on regaining my independence both physically and emotionally. On the 3rd day after implementing my financial changes, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Mr. Mitchell, this is Antonio from Hotel de Russi in Rome. Your parents have provided your contact as financial guarantor for their stay. We require immediate payment of €14,500 for their accommodation and charges. Please contact our billing department urgently." I responded simply, I am not responsible for their expenses. They will need to make their own payment arrangements. That evening, the most revealing message arrived from my father. Mason, I don't know what game you're playing, but this is completely unacceptable. We had an understanding about our financial arrangement. Your mother is in tears, and we've had to borrow money from strangers. We raised you better than this. You have obligations to this family. The word obligations crystallized everything for me. In their minds, my financial support wasn't generosity to be appreciated but an obligation to be expected. My near-death experience wasn't a reason for them to show love and concern, but an inconvenient interruption to their plans. After 2 weeks in the hospital, I was finally cleared for discharge, though I would need home care assistance for several more weeks. Tyler arranged for a nurse to visit daily and helped set up my apartment for wheelchair accessibility. As he drove me home, I checked my phone one last time. There were 16 missed calls and a final text from my mother. We've had to book economy flights home using Lucas's emergency credit card. We arrive on Tuesday. This conversation isn't over. I put my phone away and looked out the window at the Chicago skyline coming into view. No, I said quietly to myself. It's just beginning. 5 days after my discharge from the hospital, the doorbell rang. I was in the middle of a painful physical therapy session with my home care provider, struggling to bend my surgically repaired knee. The timing couldn't have been worse, or perhaps more fitting. Through the security camera feed on my phone, I could see them, my parents and Lucas, looking travel-worn and angry on my doorstep. My father was repeatedly pressing the doorbell while my mother stood with arms crossed. Lucas hung back, his expression a mixture of confusion and resentment. Do you want me to tell them you're not available? My physical therapist asked, noticing my distress. No, I replied, reaching for my crutches. This confrontation is long overdue. I made my way slowly to the door, each step a reminder of the accident they had dismissed so casually. When I finally opened it, the contrast between my broken body and their suntanned faces couldn't have been more stark. What the hell do you think you're doing? My father demanded without preamble, pushing past me into the apartment. We had to borrow money from complete strangers. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? My mother followed him in, her eyes widening slightly at the sight of my medical equipment scattered around the living room, the walker, the shower chair, the prescription bottles lined up on the coffee table. Mason, whatever point you're trying to make, this isn't the way to do it, she said, her tone attempting reasonableness while her eyes flashed with anger. We need to discuss this like adults. Lucas slunk in last, glancing around my apartment as if looking for something to criticize. Seriously uncool, bro, he muttered. I closed the door and turned to face them, leaning heavily on my crutches. My physical therapist stood nearby, silently witnessing the scene. We're in the middle of a therapy session, I said calmly. You can wait until we're finished. Or you can leave and come back later. We're not going anywhere until you explain yourself. My father insisted. And fix this mess you've created. The mortgage payment bounced. Our credit cards aren't working. What were you thinking? The physical therapist glanced at me questioningly. I nodded, giving her permission to leave us alone. We'll continue tomorrow, I told her as she gathered her equipment. Once she had gone, I lowered myself carefully into an armchair, propping my casted leg on the ottoman. The movement sent shooting pain up my side where my ribs were still healing, but I kept my expression neutral. I was thinking, I began deliberately, about a voicemail I received while I was recovering from surgery. Would you like to hear it again? Without waiting for their response, I played the recording that had been seared into my memory. Mason, it's Mom and Dad. We're at the airport waiting to board. We just wanted to let you know we're off to Rome. Don't bother calling us for the next 2 weeks. International rates are expensive, and we want to enjoy our trip without interruptions. Lucas is so excited about the cooking classes we've signed up for. The doctors say you'll live, so try not to be so dramatic about everything. We'll see you when we get back. Ciao. The room fell silent as the message ended. My mother had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable, but my father's expression remained defiant. So this is about that? He scoffed. You're punishing us because we took a pre-planned vacation? We visited you in the hospital. We made sure you were stable before we left. This isn't about the vacation, I replied, my voice steady despite the emotion threatening to break through. This is about years of taking advantage of my generosity while giving nothing in return. This is about abandoning me when I nearly died. Then having the audacity to complain that I interrupted your gelato tastings. That's not fair. My mother protested. We've always been there for you. Have you? I challenged. When? Give me one example of when you put my needs before your own or Lucas's. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, unable to produce a specific instance. We're your parents, my father said. As if that simple fact trumped all other considerations. We raised you. We put a roof over your head. The minimum legal requirements of parenthood don't entitle you to a lifetime of financial support. I countered. Especially when you couldn't be bothered to sit by my hospital bed for more than 30 minutes. Lucas, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. Look. We get that you're upset about the accident. That sucks. But cutting us off completely? That's extreme, man. I turned my attention to my brother. You've received over $200,000 from me in the past 5 years, Lucas. Education expenses, rent, car payments, loans that were never repaid. What do I have to show for that investment? Have you completed a single degree? Held a job for more than 3 months? Shown even the slightest concern for my well-being? I'm an artist, he said defensively. My career path is different. Being an artist doesn't exempt you from basic human decency, I replied. Or from supporting yourself like every other adult. My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. We'll sue you, he threatened. You can't just cut us off without warning. Actually, I can, I said, reaching for the folder my lawyer had prepared. There's no legal contract requiring me to support any of you. The house is in my name. The accounts are in my name. Every financial gift was exactly that. A gift, not an obligation. I handed him the documentation, which he snatched and began skimming with growing agitation. This is ridiculous, he sputtered. We're family. Family takes care of each other. I agree, I said quietly. Families should take care of each other. Where were you when I was fighting for my life? Where were you when I was having surgeries and battling infections? Where were you when I couldn't even go to the bathroom without assistance? The question hung in the air between us. My mother looked away, unable to meet my gaze. We didn't think it was that serious, she finally said, her voice small. You didn't want to think it was that serious, I corrected her. Because acknowledging the severity would have interfered with your vacation plans. You chose Rome over your son. Now you can live with that choice. What exactly are you saying? My father demanded, throwing the legal documents onto the coffee table. That you're cutting us off permanently? I'm saying that our relationship going forward will no longer include financial support. I clarified. You have 30 days to find new housing arrangements. Your monthly allowance has been terminated. Your credit cards and other bills are now your responsibility. Lucas will need to support himself like the adult he is. This is insane, Lucas exclaimed. What am I supposed to do about college? About rent? The same things other adults do, I replied. Get a job. Apply for financial aid. Live within your means. My mother began to cry. But the tears seemed more angry than sad. After everything we've done for you, she said bitterly. That's the problem, I replied. You haven't done anything for me. Not when it counted. Not when it was inconvenient. not when it required actual sacrifice rather than just spending my money. You ungrateful little. My father began, taking a threatening step toward me. I wouldn't. I warned, nodding toward the security camera in the corner of the room. Everything happening right now is being recorded. And I'm still recovering from life-threatening injuries. He stopped, though his hands remained clenched at his sides. You can't possibly afford your lifestyle without my support, I continued calmly. You have no savings, no retirement fund, no assets in your name. That's not my fault, and it's not my responsibility to fix. You've had decades to prepare for your future, but you chose to rely on me instead. What are we supposed to do now? My mother asked, her voice cracking. Whatever other 60-something-year-old adults with no savings do, I replied. Downsize. Get jobs. Adjust your expectations. I've been enabling your financial irresponsibility for years, and it ends today. Lucas looked stunned, as if the reality of the situation was finally sinking in. My tuition payment for next semester is due in 2 weeks, he said, more to himself than to me. Then you have 2 weeks to figure out an alternative, I replied without sympathy. My father made one last attempt. If this is about feeling unappreciated, we can work on that. We can show more gratitude. But punishing us financially isn't the answer. This isn't punishment, I said firmly. This is consequence. For years, you've treated me like an ATM while giving nothing in return. You left me alone in a hospital after I nearly died so you could eat pasta in Rome. Now you're experiencing the natural result of those choices. They stayed for another hour, cycling through anger, bargaining, guilt-tripping, and eventually desperate pleading. I remained firm, referring back to the documented history of my support, and their neglect whenever they tried to rewrite our family narrative. Finally, exhausted and hoarse from arguing, my father gathered up the legal papers and gestured for my mother and brother to follow him to the door. This isn't over, he said ominously. You'll regret this decision. I already regret waiting so long to make it, I replied. Goodbye. As the door closed behind them, I felt an overwhelming wave of emotion, grief for the family relationship I had always wanted but never truly had, relief at finally standing up for myself, and a strange sense of peace knowing that whatever happened next would be on my terms, not theirs. The confrontation had been painful, but necessary. Like the surgeries that had saved my life. Cutting out this toxic dynamic was the only way to truly heal. 6 months passed like a slow exhalation. My physical recovery progressed steadily. Milestone by milestone, first walking without crutches, then climbing stairs unassisted, eventually jogging short distances on the treadmill. The human body has a remarkable capacity for healing when given proper care and time. The same, I discovered, is true of the human spirit. I moved out of my apartment into a new home in a different neighborhood, not providing my new address to my family. The change of scenery helped mark the transition to this new chapter of my life. My new place had wide hallways and an open floor plan that accommodated my initial mobility limitations, but it also had room to grow as I continued to heal. Professionally, my company thrived despite my temporary step back during recovery. Tyler had proven himself an exceptional partner, managing day-to-day operations while keeping me connected to major decisions. When I returned to work part-time, then eventually full-time, I found a renewed sense of purpose. We expanded into 2 new markets and hired 15 additional employees, creating a company culture built on mutual respect and clear boundaries, lessons I had learned the hard way. Through distant relatives and mutual connections, I occasionally received updates about my parents' situation. As I had predicted, the financial reality hit them hard. They were forced to sell many of their possessions and move into a small apartment in a less desirable area. My father, who had been retired for several years, took a part-time job as a sales associate at a hardware store. My mother found work as a receptionist at a dental office. They were getting by, but the lifestyle adjustment had been severe. Lucas had dropped out of college, again, when his tuition payment came due. According to a cousin who remained in contact with both of us, he had moved in with friends temporarily before finding a studio apartment and a job waiting tables. It wasn't the life he had envisioned for himself, but it was the life his own choices had created. I felt a complex mixture of emotions about their circumstances. Occasional guilt, yes, but primarily a sense that a natural correction had occurred. They were living within their actual means for perhaps the first time in decades. There was a certain integrity to that, even if they hadn't chosen it willingly. My own healing journey extended beyond the physical. Weekly therapy sessions helped me understand the dysfunctional family dynamics I had enabled for so long, and why I had been so desperate for their approval that I would financially support their mistreatment of me. Money often becomes a substitute for emotional connection in families, my therapist explained. You were buying the love you weren't receiving freely. This insight struck me deeply. I had used my financial success to try to earn the love and respect my parents had withheld, creating a transactional relationship that ultimately satisfied no one. Breaking that cycle had been painful but necessary for all of us. As my physical strength returned, I found new purpose in giving back in more meaningful ways. I established a foundation to support car accident victims who lacked adequate insurance or family support, providing financial assistance for medical bills, home modifications, and therapy services. I also became a mentor to young entrepreneurs, particularly those from challenging family backgrounds. My social circle transformed as well. Without the constant drain of family obligations, I had more time and emotional energy to invest in genuine friendships. Tyler remained my closest friend, but I also developed connections with others who valued reciprocity and mutual support. I even began dating again, approaching relationships with a healthier understanding of boundaries and genuine care. 8 months after our confrontation, I unexpectedly encountered my parents at my cousin Melissa's wedding. I had hesitated to attend knowing they would be there, but decided not to let their presence dictate my choices any longer. The initial meeting was awkward, stiff nods across the church, careful avoidance during the cocktail hour. But as the reception progressed, my mother approached my table during a moment when I was alone. You look well, she said tentatively, her eyes taking in my recovered appearance. The limp is almost gone. Physical therapy works wonders, I replied neutrally. How have you been? She sighed, aging visibly before my eyes. It's been an adjustment. Your father's back hurts all the time from standing at the store. My job is fine, though the younger staff treat me like I'm ancient. We're managing. I nodded, waiting for what I suspected would come next, a request to reconsider my decision, perhaps, or a subtle guilt trip about their hardships. Instead, she surprised me. I've had a lot of time to think, she said, her voice low, about how we left you in the hospital. About all the years before that. I'm not saying we deserve what happened, but I understand why you did it. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was more self-awareness than I had ever heard from her before. Thank you for saying that, I replied simply. Is there any chance? She began, then seemed to reconsider her words. We miss you. Not the money, well, yes, the money too, I won't lie, but mostly you. Could we maybe talk sometime? Try to find a way forward? I considered her request carefully. The old Mason would have jumped at this opening, eager to repair the relationship at any cost. The new Mason recognized that meaningful reconciliation would require more than one ambiguous conversation at a wedding. I'm not ready for that yet, I told her honestly. Maybe someday. But there would need to be real acknowledgement of the patterns that got us here, not just missing the financial support. Disappointment flickered across her face, but she nodded. I understand. If you change your mind, you know how to reach us. As she walked away, I felt a surprising sense of peace. I hadn't slammed the door permanently, but I hadn't compromised my boundaries either. That small interaction represented genuine growth for both of us. My father and Lucas kept their distance throughout the event, watching me warily from across the room. I caught Lucas looking at me several times with an expression I couldn't quite interpret, perhaps resentment mixed with a reluctant respect. He had lost the most materially from my decision. But according to Melissa, he had also grown the most. Having to support himself had forced a maturity that our family dynamic had previously stunted. As I drove home from the wedding, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past year. A near-fatal accident had ultimately given me the clarity to see my family's situation for what it truly was and the courage to change it. The crash had broken more than my bones. It had shattered the illusions I had maintained about my relationships and my role within my family. Sometimes the most painful experiences bring the most valuable lessons. I had learned that real family is defined by love and support, not blood relation or financial obligation. I had discovered that establishing boundaries isn't selfish, but essential for healthy relationships. Most importantly, I had realized that my worth wasn't determined by what I could provide to others, but by the integrity with which I lived my own life. The road to recovery, both physical and emotional, had been long and often painful. But standing on the other side, I could see that the journey had led me to a more authentic and fulfilling life than I had ever known before. So what would you do if your family abandoned you in your darkest hour? Would you have made the same choice I did, or found another path? Drop a comment below with your thoughts. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience and self-discovery. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the family we choose is more valuable than the family we're born into. Take care of yourselves, and of those who truly take care of you.